Imagine, if you will, a dusty vault in Virginia Beach sealed for decades containing transcripts so profound they were buried by those who feared their power. What if these forbidden pages, dictated by a sleeping man in 1938, hold the key to unlocking the veil between life and death? A revelation Edgar Cayce glimpsed in trance, warning of America's soul-shattering trials ahead? These hidden archives, once guarded by his inner circle, now whisper of upheavals that mirror our chaotic present, forcing us to confront the immortality of consciousness itself. To understand the gravity of these suppressed documents, we must first step back into the life of Edgar Cayce, the enigmatic psychic born in 1877 amid the rolling hills of rural Kentucky. A simple photographer by trade, Cayce lived a quiet existence until a bout of laryngitis in his youth stripped him of his voice. Desperate, he submitted to hypnosis, and in that altered state, not only restored his speech, but unlocked a gateway to forbidden knowledge. From that moment, for over 4 decades, Cayce became the quote, _0, conducting more than 14,000 readings in a modest office overlooking the Atlantic. Yet, these sessions were no mere curiosities. They were clandestine rituals, shrouded in secrecy, because the visions they revealed clashed with the era's rigid doctrines. His own devout Christian faith often left him tormented as the truths emerging from his unconscious mind challenged the boundaries of Scripture and science alike. Why were these transcripts overlooked? In an age of skepticism and institutional control, Cayce's circle, fearing ridicule or worse, archived them away, only surfacing fragments today as global events align with eerie precision. Fade to the dim glow of a single lamp in that Virginia Beach sanctum, where the air hung heavy with the scent of salt and unspoken mysteries. Each day, Cayce would recline on his worn couch, his secretary Gladys Davis poised with notepad in hand, her pen racing to capture words from a voice not entirely his own. In this self-induced trance, deeper than any coma, Cayce accessed what he termed the Akashic Records, a vast, ethereal repository of every soul's journey across time, a hidden archive of human consciousness that transcends the physical world. These were no ordinary insights. They pierced the illusions of death, revealing consciousness as eternal, unbound by the body's decay. Gladys, ever the silent guardian, transcribed revelations on healing, reincarnation, and the collective fate of humanity, her notes forming a confidential ledger that doctors worldwide would later beg to consult. Yet few ever saw the full scope, suppressed by Cayce's own doubts and the world's reluctance to embrace such psychic depths. As the shadows lengthen in this reconstructed transcript from a long-lost 1940 session, we arrive at the core of Cayce's forbidden vision, a prophecy of America's impending transformation, etched in the Akashic ether. In readings from the 1930s, such as the suppressed document numbered 3976-15, Cayce foresaw a, quote, one of the nation's foundations starting in the late 20th century, escalating into the 21st. He described cataclysmic shifts, raging storms, reshaping coastlines, quakes fracturing the earth, and societal fractures tearing at the fabric of unity, not as random chaos, but as deliberate cosmic forces purging outdated illusions. These upheavals, he intimated in trance, would dismantle empires of materialism, compelling souls to rediscover their spiritual essence amid the ruins. Eyewitness accounts from his era, buried in personal letters, confirm how Cayce's warnings extended to economic collapses mirroring 1929's crash and the dual world war's arc, all converging on this era of American reckoning. But the intrigue deepens as we peel back the psychological layers of CAYCE's revelations, transitioning from earthly tremors to the inner earthquakes of the mind. In altered states akin to symbolic death, where the ego dissolves into universal awareness, CAYCE grappled with the paradox of existence. If consciousness persists beyond the grave, why do we cling to fear? His visions painted death not as oblivion, but as a threshold to archetypal realms where suppressed truths about reincarnation and collective karma surface. Drawing from one chilling medical case, in reading 541-11, CAYCE diagnosed a woman's elusive spinal ailment, unseen by 3 specialists, prescribing precise osteopathic maneuvers and herbal infusions that vanished her affliction in months. The overseeing doctor, haunted by this miracle, delved into CAYCE's methods, uncovering how such healings tapped into the Akashic flow, proving that hidden knowledge could rewrite the script of suffering. Yet this psychological expansion reveals CAYCE's torment. A man awake to the illusion of separation, yet chained by his waking world's doubts, his prophecies a bridge between the conscious self and the infinite unconscious. Now, venture further into the speculative shadows of these archives, where CAYCE's trance whispers an unrecorded echo. What if consciousness after death lingers as a luminous echo in the Akashic web, replaying unresolved earthly bonds until the soul achieves harmonic release? This forbidden insight, aligned with his visions of eternal records, suggests that the dearly departed aren't lost, but woven into our dreams, guiding us toward awakening amid crisis, a psychological tether that blurs the line between mourner and the mourned. As these suppressed transcripts fade into the ether, one haunting question remains. In the midst of America's unraveling, will we heed the sleeping prophet's call to embrace the hidden immortality within, or let the veil of forgetfulness seal our fate forever? In the dim archives of Virginia Beach, a forgotten stenographic record from 1940 lies buried, transcripts of Edgar Cayce's trance-induced visions, sealed away by his own secretary, Gladys Davis, to shield them from a world not ready for their seismic truths. What if I told you these suppressed sessions foretold not just the fate of nations, but the very pulse of our collective soul awakening? This is the hidden revelation that could rewrite everything we believe about America's destiny. Picture a man born in 1877 amid the rolling hills of rural Kentucky, Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet, who slipped into hypnotic states to access what he called the Akashic Records, an ethereal library of all human knowledge, past and future. For over 4 decades, from his modest office in Virginia Beach, he delivered more than 14,000 readings on health, history, and prophecy, often warning of upheavals that would test humanity's spirit. Yet much of this material was overlooked or deliberately hushed post his death in 1945, dismissed as the ramblings of a psychic outlier by a skeptical establishment more comfortable with cold science than visionary insight. Gladys Davis, his loyal stenographer, transcribed these sessions in secrecy, archiving them under the auspices of the Association for Research and Enlightenment, fearing they might incite panic or ridicule in an era gripped by world wars and atomic fears. These weren't mere predictions. They were glimpses into altered states where Cayce communed with forces beyond the veil, revealing truths that bridge the personal soul to the planetary whole. At the heart of these forbidden transcripts pulses a core revelation. Cayce envisioned a grand spiritual ignition across America, what he termed the stirring of Kundalini energy, not just in individuals, but rippling through the nation's consciousness, like a dormant serpent uncoiling from the spine of the continent. In one trance state, captured in reading 281-13, He described this as a late 20th century surge, where millions would awaken to meditation's quiet power, psychic intuitions, and ancient healing arts long buried in Eastern lore. Yoga, once an alien whisper in the West, would sprout like wildflowers. Schools would weave mindfulness into daily rhythms, and hospitals would embrace holistic remedies over steel scalpels alone. From his 1940s vantage, when such ideas bordered on heresy, CAYCE saw this renaissance igniting first along the eastern seaboard, Virginia Beach as its luminous epicenter, then tracing invisible energy meridians westward, transforming a materialistic society into one attuned to the unseen. And remarkably, as the Association for Research and Enlightenment stands today as a beacon for global seekers in that very city, we witness the prophecy unfolding. Over 36 million Americans now bend into yoga poses, corporations mandate meditation breaks, and integrative medicine flows through the veins of our healthcare system. But CAYCE's vision cut deeper. This awakening wasn't a luxury, but a lifeline. In reading 3976-29 amid the haze of his trance, he warned that without cultivating these inner faculties, humanity's technological blaze would consume us, a wisdomless fire devouring its own spark. As the echoes of that reading fade, imagine the camera panning across a trembling earth, where CAYCE's prophecies converge into a profound philosophical expanse, intertwining the psyche's shadows with the planet's groans. He didn't stop at spiritual trends. In visions spanning decades like reading 3976-15, CAYCE pierced the veil to unveil cataclysmic shifts, eastern coastlines fracturing, new lands surging from Atlantic and Pacific depths, the Great Lakes carving a path to the Gulf, and cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco yielding to the waves. Japan sinking in parts, Northern Europe's contours redrawn, Greenland's ice giving way to open seas. These weren't fever dreams, but repeated urgings from his altered states, time to stir from 1958 through the early 21st century. Skeptics wave them off, yet today's tremors, escalating earthquakes, polar thaws, swelling oceans, and tempests of unnatural fury whisper that the changes creep in, subtler than a sudden apocalypse, but no less inexorable. Yet here's the psychological rift that CAYCE's trance words force us to confront. These upheavals aren't blind chaos, but the Earth's living retort to our shadowed minds. In the suppressed tones of reading 826-8, he revealed the planet as a conscious being, its crust and core attuned to humanity's emotional tides. When collective negativity festers, greed, war, disconnection, the Earth purges through quakes and floods, a cosmic mirror demanding we evolve. This isn't mysticism divorced from reason. It's an existential tension that gnaws at our sense of control, echoing indigenous wisdom, and now validated by science. Studies from the HeartMath Institute illuminate how our shared emotions ripple into the planet's magnetic field, a discovery quantum physics inches toward, as if CAYCE, from his Kentucky cradle of intuition, peered 80 years ahead into entangled realities. His perspective on death amplifies this intrigue, not as an end but a threshold where consciousness sheds the body's cage, confronting hidden truths that bind us to the Earth's own rebirth. In these visions, death becomes a psychological portal, urging us to question: if our inner worlds shape outer worlds, what buried fears must we unearth to avert the storm? And in a speculative whisper drawn from the fringes of his Akashic glimpses, one not etched in the original transcripts but aligned with his soul's eternal wanderings, CAYCE might have pondered consciousness after death as a luminous reunion where individual sparks merge into a universal mind. reviewing earthly choices not in judgment but in compassionate recalibration, preparing the soul for its next incarnation amid evolving worlds. These earth shifts, CAYCE insisted across his hidden readings, hang in the balance, not fate's iron decree, but threads woven by our collective will. As the breaking up period serves as a wake-up call to return to spiritual values, what hidden choices will you make when the ground beneath us begins to shift? Imagine, if you will, a dusty vault in Virginia Beach, sealed for decades, holding transcripts from a psychic's trance states, visions so radical they were buried to avoid shattering the world's fragile grip on reality. These lost readings of Edgar CAYCE, the sleeping prophet, whisper forbidden truths about death not as an end, but as a gateway to unbound consciousness, revelations his own secretary Gladys Davis transcribed in secrecy during the turbulent 1930s and 40s, fearing they would unleash chaos if revealed too soon. Born in 1877 amid the misty hollows of rural Kentucky, Edgar CAYCE was no ordinary man. A self-taught photographer by day, he slipped into hypnotic trances at night, channeling insights from what he called the Akashic Records, an ethereal archive of all human souls. By the time he established his Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, his office had become a clandestine hub for the spiritually seeking, drawing pilgrims desperate for guidance on the upheavals ahead for late 20th and 21st century America. Yet much of his work on the afterlife's hidden mechanics was overlooked, tucked away in unmarked files, dismissed by skeptics as mere fantasy, while governments and institutions suppress the implications, lest they upend our understanding of mortality and the mind's eternal reach. Fade in on one core revelation unearthed from those shadowed archives: CAYCE's vision of consciousness as the ultimate healer, transcending the physical decay we fear as death. In a trance documented as reading 4021-1, he diagnosed a young woman's hopeless battle with advanced tuberculosis, her lungs ravaged beyond medical salvation. But CAYCE didn't prescribe pills alone. He urged her into an altered state of daily meditation, breathing exercises synced to rhythmic prayers, and visualizations of golden light infiltrating her very essence, directing the soul's infinite energy to rebuild what medicine deemed lost. She adhered, vanishing into quiet rituals that mirrored CAYCE's own descents into the subconscious. 6 months later, X-rays revealed not just remission, but lungs fortified stronger than before, a miracle her physicians could only attribute to the impossible. This wasn't sleight of hand. It was CAYCE unveiling the mind's dominion over matter, a suppressed transcript hinting that death's shadow is pierced by focused intent, where the body's frailty dissolves under the soul's command. As the echoes of that healing fade, we transition deeper into the psychological labyrinth CAYCE mapped, a realm where death isn't oblivion, but a profound reconfiguration of the self. Drawing from reading 281-4, he revealed in hushed tones during a 1930 session that every soul deliberately chooses incarnation in this era of global reckoning, not for suffering, but as a forge for accelerated evolution. These modern tempests, earth shifts, societal fractures serve as crucibles, compressing lifetimes of growth into one fierce blaze. CAYCE, eyes closed in his Virginia Beach chair, foresaw spiritually attuned groups worldwide as anchors, their collective meditations and prayers forming invisible shields against chaos, raising vibrations to avert the worst. Yet this carried an existential weight. What if our hidden fears of death fuel these very storms? In reading 5748-2, he outlined the soul's prerequisites for such ascent: daily attunement through service, unyielding positivity amid turmoil, and immersion in universal truths, warning that without them, the psyche fragments, mistaking endings for annihilation. Now, envision the veil thinning further. In a speculative glimpse aligned with CAYCE's cosmic tapestry, consciousness post-death might linger as a luminous echo, reviewing incarnate threads in a non-linear hall of mirrors, where fragmented selves merge into the all-knowing, birthing new forms unburdened by earthly amnesia, a rebirth not of flesh but of infinite awareness, forever reshaping our choices in the living dream. And as America's prophesied role emerges from reading 3976-19, CAYCE painted a beacon rising from crisis, a nation fusing material might with psychic awakening, where schools blend meditation with equations, healers wield prayer beside scalpels, and leaders attuned to spiritual currents. But beneath this hope lies the intrigue. What if destruction's guise masks reconstruction? The death of old paradigms birthing a collective mind unbound. In reading 602-3, he urged formation of hidden circles, study groups delving these truths, applying them not in theory, but in the grit of daily existence, for knowledge inert is dust, while lived, it ignites transformation. The archives brim with validations. CAYCE's premonition of Israel's rebirth decades early, the Dead Sea Scrolls, unearthing, sketched in trance, before the sands yielded them. Even the 1929 crash's shadow, foretold in prosperous times. Yet his profoundest gift pierces the veil of being itself. From reading 3744-4, consciousness arises not from gray matter, but as an eternal force wielding the brain like a vessel, independent, immortal, defying death's illusion. What hidden currents of your own soul are stirring now, waiting to be awakened? Imagine, if you will, a dusty vault in Virginia Beach, sealed for decades, containing transcripts from the 1940s. Readings so profound they were buried to avoid shattering the fragile boundaries of science and faith. These forbidden pages, dictated by Edgar CAYCE himself in trance states, whisper of a consciousness unbound by flesh, a hidden truth that could redefine our grip on reality. What if the sleeping prophet's final visions were suppressed not for their predictions of doom, but for unveiling the immortality of the soul? I first encountered CAYCE's world as a young researcher sifting through the archives of the Association for Research and Enlightenment, founded in 1931 to safeguard his work. Born in 1877 in the rolling hills of rural Kentucky, Edgar CAYCE was no ordinary man, a self-taught photographer turned reluctant psychic, whose quote too began as healings for the afflicted and evolved into prophecies that pierced the veil of time. By the 1920s, from his modest office in Virginia Beach, he had documented over 14,000 sessions, delving into lost civilizations, health remedies, and glimpses of America's turbulent future in the late 20th and 21st centuries. Yet much of this material was overlooked or deliberately sidelined, deemed too esoteric by mainstream scholars, too threatening to established doctrines by religious watchdogs. Gladys Davis, his devoted stenographer and gatekeeper, transcribed these sessions in secrecy, ensuring that revelations about human potential remained shielded from a world not yet ready. Why? Because CAYCE's insights challenged the very notion of death as an end, positioning it instead as a doorway to eternal awareness, a perspective that could upend empires of thought. At the heart of these suppressed transcripts lies a core revelation, one that cuts through the noise of modern skepticism. Consciousness is not a fleeting spark of the brain, but an eternal force, independent and omnipresent, merely borrowing the physical form as a vessel. In one overlooked reading from the 1930s, CAYCE described entering altered states where his mind detached from the body, roaming the Akashic records, an infinite library of soul's journeys. This explains how he, while seemingly unconscious on a creaky office couch, could diagnose ailments across oceans or foresee earth-shaking upheavals. Fade in now to the dim glow of that Virginia Beach room, the air thick with the scent of old paper and incense, as CAYCE's voice, calm, otherworldly, emerges from the ether. Humanity slumbers in ignorance of its own divinity, latent psychic gifts dormant like seeds in barren soil, awaiting the storms of transformation to awaken. This truth ripples outward, deepening the psychological labyrinth of our existence. CAYCE's visions weren't mere parlor tricks. They were philosophical indictments of our material illusions, urging us to confront death, not as oblivion, but as a profound metamorphosis of the self. In the quiet interludes between readings, he reflected on how social upheavals, wars, migrations, environmental cataclysms serve as crucibles forging collective consciousness toward unity. Picture the tension building. As prophecies of American reckonings unfold, from fractured societies to shifting lands, we stand at the precipice, our thoughts and intentions acting as unseen architects of fate. No longer passive spectators, we are co-weavers of destiny, our prayers and willful actions bending the arc of reality. Yet this empowerment carries an existential weight. What hidden fears must we unearth within to harness such power? CAYCE's trance-induced wisdom deepens this intrigue, revealing archetypes of the soul that echo through lifetimes, where death symbolizes not loss, but a symbolic shedding, a plunge into inner worlds rich with forbidden knowledge. And consider the speculative layer, drawn from the thematic echoes in CAYCE's broader canon. If consciousness endures beyond the body's final breath, perhaps it lingers in a luminous threshold realm, reviewing incarnations like chapters in an unending tome, where unresolved earthly tensions dissolve into pure potential, a gentle nudge toward reincarnation, unmentioned in the archive sessions, but resonant with his visions of soul evolution. As the echoes of these lost recordings fade into the Virginia Beach twilight, one haunting question remains. In the face of the transformations CAYCE foresaw, those inevitable tides reshaping America and beyond, will you awaken your inner prophet, or let the shadows of unawareness claim your path? The map is etched in those suppressed pages, the choice eternally yours.